This is a continuation of our discussion of last week. Are women obligated in the mitzvah of the Haggadah? Does a woman have an obligation to recite the entire Haggadah just like a man does? The short answer is she's obligated to recite the Haggadah because the Shulchan Aruch says in a very blanket statement, which seems quite vague, but is sweeping in its vagueness. It says that a woman has an obligation to fulfill all of the mitzvos of the night of the Seder. And as we enumerated, there are 5 mitzvahs to fulfill at the Seder. 3 are midirabanan, 2 are midioraisa. The 2 that are midioraisa are the mitzvah of achilas matzah and the mitzvah of the Haggadah to Levincha or of Magid, reciting the Haggadah. The 3 rabbinic laws are arba kosos, the 4 cups, achilas moror, eating moror, and saying Hallel. So the Shulchan Aruch paskins that women have the same obligation as men in all of those 5 mitzvahs. Now, the question that we had last week is why? And this was the question that the Minchas Chinuch asked on the Sefer HaChinuch. The Sefer HaChinuch had told us that regarding the 21st mitzvah, which he enumerates as the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, the mitzvah of relating the Exodus the night of the 15th of Nisan, men and women are equally obligated in this biblical commandment. And the question that we had was, or that, not us, the Minchas Chinuch had was, why should this be? And we have to back up. Now, what is the mitzvah of the Haggadah to Levincha? It is a mitzvah's aseh, shahazman grama, that is time-related, because it's something that can only be done at a specific time. If so, why should women be obligated? Now, we saw that there's a statement in the Gemara that tells us why women are obligated in arba kosos. Women are obligated in arba kosos, according to the Gemara in Pesachim, because af hein hayu ba'oso hanes. They too were part of the miracle. Now, one would think that svara should apply to all mitzvahs aseh shazman grama, as long as we can say that af hein hayu ba'oso hanes, they were part of the miracle. But the problem is that Tosfos in Maseches Pesachim told us that argument, that rabbinical argument of af hein hayu ba'oso hanes, only works to obligate women in rabbinically instituted mitzvahs aseh shazman grama, not biblically mandated mitzvahs aseh shazman grama. So we can certainly understand why women are obligated in arba kosos, because it's a rabbinical mitzvah, and it's a mitzvah aseh shazman grama, but af hein hayu ba'oso hanes, they too were privy to the miracle. But the mitzvah of Haggadah to Levincha is a mitzvah aseh deoraisa. So according to Tosfos, the argument of af hein hayu ba'oso hanes should not be appendable to this mitzvah to make women obligated. And that was the kasha of the Minchas Chinuch. Now, up until now, we've seen a few things. We saw the Birkei Yosef quoting one of his rebbeim called in a sefer called the Beis David. I don't know who authored the Beis David, but it's an early Acharon, it seems, or perhaps even a late Rishon, who said that based on this, he concludes that women are not obligated in the mitzvah of Magid, contrary to the Shulchan Aruch. And the Birkei Yosef, which we didn't see yet, goes and spends a significant amount of time trying to slug that up. And one of the things that we're going to pick up on is to see the arguments of the Birkei Yosef himself in just a minute. But then we saw 2 other Achronim, later Achronim. One was the Maram Shik and one was the Kli Chemda, who tried to argue why women are still obligated in the mitzvah of Haggadah, even though it's a biblical mitzvah aseh shazman grama. So the first one was the Maram Shik. The Maram Shik said, it was really a brilliant answer. The Maram Shik said, how do we know that women are obligated in the mitzvah of matzah? Matzah is also a mitzvah aseh shazman grama that's biblical. So how do we know that women have an obligation to eat matzah the night of the Seder? Does anyone remember?
Not allowed to eat bread.
It's a hekesh between what? Between Isser Chametz and the obligation to eat matzah. The pasuk says, the first part of the pasuk says, Lo sochalalav chametz, do not eat chametz on Pesach, and shivas yomim tochalalav matzos lechem oni. And for 7 days you eat matzah. So the Gemara learns from this pasuk that anyone who's obligated to not eat chametz on Pesach, and that would include women, because women are obligated in all mitzvahs lo saseh, even though they're time related, is obligated also in the positive commandment of eating matzah, because the Torah connects the two of them together. So the knech that the Maram Shik had added was that why did the Gemara choose that pasuk, which is in Parshas Re'eh, which all the way in the book of Devarim. There's a much earlier pasuk in Parshas Bo, which also connects the Isser of Chametz to the obligation to eat matzah. He says, because the pasuk in Re'eh calls matzah lechem oni. And what is lechem oni? It's not only bread of affliction, but it's from the word la'anot. Lechem sha'onim alav dvarim harbe. It is the type of bread that requires conversation and response. And based on that, the Maram Shik said, why did Chazal choose that? Because if matzah, by definition, is a bread that must be eaten with explanation, with conversation, that means that anyone who's obligated to eat matzah has an obligation to discuss the eating of the matzah. And that's how I know that women are obligated in the mitzvah of Haggadah, even midioraisa. Then the second answer we saw was an answer from the Kli Chemda, also a later Acharon, and we just saw it very tersely because he says he discussed it more extensively in another source, but I can't find that source. And he writes that it's a big chiddush. I don't know how many other people subscribe to this, but he says that it's true that women are exempt from mitzvah saseh shazman grama, but only mitzvah saseh shazman graba that were given after Matan Torah. But if the Jewish people were given a mitzvah saseh shazman grama before Matan Torah, then women are also commanded in this mitzvah. And he said the whole reason is because the Torah only connects the mitzvah, all other mitzvahs, saseh shazman grama, to tefillin after the Torah is given, to teach me that women are, just like women are exempt from tefillin, they're exempt from all time-bound mitzvahs. But since this mitzvah was given before we even left Mitzrayim, it was a mitzvah that was incumbent upon men and women equally, even though it's a mitzvah saseh shazman grama. So we left off with 3 opinions last week. This is just a review. Opinion number 1 of the Beis David is that taka women are not obligated in the mitzvah of Magid, which doesn't seem the way the Shulchan Aruch paskins. Opinion number 2 is the Maram Shik, who says that women are obligated midioraisa because once they're obligated to eat matzah, which is called lechem oni, lechem sha'onim alav dvarim harbe, then they automatically linked it to the mitzvah of discussion of the matzah on the night of the Seder. And the Kli Chemda also says that women are obligated midioraisa in the mitzvah of Haggadah to Levincha because it was a mitzvah saseh shazman grama that was presented to Klal Yisrael before Matan Torah. Okay? That's where we are.
Do women have to say Kiddush Levana?
Do women have to say Kiddush Levana? That's a good question. It seems like it's a mitzvah saseh shazman grama. We paskin that women, not only are they exempt from Kiddush Levana, but we paskin that even if a woman wants to say Kiddush Levana, based on Kabbalah, the Shalah HaKadosh says not to. Woman should not say Kiddush Levana.
Even though it is given before Matan Torah, according to the Shita.
Well, that's an interesting point. You see, it's not so clear that the mitzvah of Kiddush Levana was given after Matan Torah. To declare a month Rosh Chodesh is the biblical commandment. But Kiddush Levana is to say a blessing on the new phase of the moon. That's not to declare the day. When you say go out and say Kiddush Levana, you're not saying today is Rosh Chodesh, right? So it's not really a mitzvah saseh deoraisa to do Kiddush Levana. No? Anyway, this brings us to where we were holding last, which was in the Birkei Yosef. The Birkei Yosef just got through quoting the Beis David, that according to the Beis David, based on the power of the Minchas Chinuch's question, that it's a mitzvah sasei shav zman grama, that's midioraisa, that's biblical, women really are not obligated in the mitzvah of Haggadah. Now, just as an aside, let me just point out, this is not just an academic question. How many of our wives would love to be exempt from the mitzvah of Haggadah? Right? Because when you think about it, what are they thinking about during Haggadah? If they're young mothers, they're worried about the kids. If they're older mothers or bubbies, they're worried about the food in the kitchen and making sure that everything gets set up in time. So there's a lot of reason to want to try for a woman to say, well, maybe I could say I'm putter. But there's another non-academic practical issue. Remember what we said last week? What would be the nafkamina if we discovered that a woman is not obligated, at least not midioraisa, in the mitzvah of Haggadah? To be motzi. You can be yotzei, the mitzvah of magid, by listening to someone say the Haggadah, and we know the principle of shomeya ka'ona, that if you hear someone else recite something that you yourself are obligated to recite, you can be yotzei as long as they have kavanah to be motzi, you have kavanah to be yotzei, and you're okay. But that's only if they have the same level of chiyuv as you do. If they don't have the same level of chiyuv, so same level of obligation, so then no matter how much you'd like to sit back and be passive, you can't be yotzei with their recital. So that's another reason why this has real, practical issues involved. So what I'd like to take a look at is the Birkei Yosef's objection to the Beis David. And he states as follows. We're really in the second paragraph of source number 11. It's on the third page of your handout. Omnam ikala medak al harav Beis David, de kapasik vitani, de b'mili deoraisa lo itmar sha'af hein, bichlal upeturos. He says, I really have a problem with the Beis David. He seems to take it as a given that any biblical mitzvah, that's mitzvah sasei shav zman grama, you don't apply the principle of af hein hayu ba'oso hanes to obligate women. And this is based on Tosfos that we saw in Pesachim. Al pi divrei Tosfos hanizkar ki ilu ha de Tosfos milsa psikta v'lo rabu aleha. And look at his language. He says he's stating this as a given, as if Tosfos is the final authority on the matter. V'ha ashkachan laha Tosfos perakama de Megillah daf dalid shekasvu zal. But there's another Tosfos in another Maseches that seems to say just the opposite. He says, Yesh makshim lama li hakesha dechol sheyeshnu beval tochal yeshnu bekumachol matzah tepuk le mitam sha'af hein. Tosfos explicitly in Maseches Megillah says that there's a valid question. Why do we need a hekesh, the pasuk in Parshas Re'eh, to obligate women to eat matzah because they're prohibited from eating chametz? Even without that pasuk, just say, af hein hayu ba'oso hanes, and that's the reason they're obligated to eat matzah. V'yesh lomar de mishum haytaima lo michayev ela midurabanan ilav mehekesha. And so Tosfos answers, first answer that Tosfos gives, is that if I only had the argument of af hein hayu ba'oso hanes, then women would only be obligated to eat matzah midurabanan, because the principle of af hein hayu ba'oso hanes is a rabbinical concept, and therefore we only obligate them midrabanan. But in order for us to know that they're obligated midioraisa, we need the hekesh. That's Tosfos' first answer. But then Tosfos brings from another Tosafist called Rabbeinu Yosef. He says, "V'Rabbeinu Yosef ish Yerushalayim tiretz desalkadaitan lemiftere migzeira shava de tutu mechag hasukos ad kan lashono." That I might have thought that even though we could apply the principle of af hein hayu ba'oso hanes to make them obligated to eat matzah, but there's a counter svara to make them putter. Because we know that the Chazal in a number of places connect the mitzvahs of the first night of Sukkot to the first night of Pesach. And since women are exempt from the mitzvahs of the first night of Sukkot, I would have argued that they're exempt from the mitzvahs of the first night of Pesach, were it not for a special pasuk. That's the svara of Rabbeinu Yosef Ish Yerushalayim. Hare de l'shinuye kama dahatosvos gam b'mitzvos deoraisa michayev midorabanan mitam sha'af hein. He says, you see it from Tosfos' first answer that clearly women are going to be obligated, even in a biblical commandment, that's Zman Grama, because of the svar of Afen Hayu Ba'oso Hanes. So how could the Beis David say that they're completely potter? Uchefizeh b'Haggadah nami aftehu mitzvahs aseh miyodarayis u'peturas hanashim mitam dahavi mitzvahs aseh Zman Grama mikol makom mechayvim mirabbanan mitam sha'af hein. And therefore, even if you were going to say that women are exempt from mitzvahs aseh Zman Grama, but at least you could apply the principle of Afin Hayu Ba'oso Hanes to at least obligate them rabbinically. So that's according to Tosfos' first answer. And then if you take a look at Tosfos' second answer, that's the next paragraph. He says, Va'od de'meitiritz Rabbeinu Yosef Yerushalayim shetiretz t'itzrich hakesha mishum gzeira shava de'tutu mashma degam midioraisa mechayvin alu mitam sha'af hein. He says, and furthermore, if you take a look at the second answer of Tosfos from Rabbeinu Yosef, it seems that, were it not for this connection of Tesvav to Tesvav, from Pesach to Sukkot, I would have said that women are obligated to eat matzah because of Afin Hayu Ba'oso Hanes, even midioraisa, but that the two Gezeira Shava exempts them. So you have two conflicting arguments. One is to make them obligated midioraisa, and the other one is to exempt them midioraisa, and that's why you need the hekesh to resolve the conflict. But it seems from that second answer in Tosfos that women would even be obligated midioraisa because of the svar of Afin Hayu Ba'oso Hanes. We're not going to go into the last few lines of this Birkei Yosef, but the bottom line that the Birkei Yosef brings out is that it's a machlokes between Tosfos and Pesachim and Tosfos and Megillah, whether we can apply the principle of Afin Hayu Ba'oso Hanes to a biblical mitzvah saseh shazman grama. So the Birkei Yosef's problem with the Beis David is, fine, you've been able to demonstrate from Tosfos and Pesachim that you don't apply Afin Hayu Ba'oso Hanes to biblical commandments. But who says that Tosfos is the final authority on the matter? Why don't you look at Tosfos and Megillah? And in Tosfos, from Tosfos and Megillah, he does apply Afin Hayu Ba'oso Hanes even to biblical commandments. So that's the Birkei Yosef's argument. At least he's arguing women should be obligated in the mitzvah of Magid, at least midorabanan, because Afin Hayu Ba'oso Hanes. Okay?
So it's interesting, he finds the Gemara in Tosfos and Megillah. The Tosfos and Pesachim brings down the Rashbam that right away has that other opinion.
That's what we had surmised last week, that according to the Rashbam, you could use Afin Hayu Ba'oso Hanes.
So your whole kasha, Minchas Chinuch doesn't even get off the ground if you just say everybody learns like the Rashbam.
Right.
Unless this whole thing is on the premise that we paskin like Tosfos and Pesachim, and we don't hold like Rabbeinu Yosef, and so on and so forth. So you do develop the question.
Right.
But
So you're right, Lazer. It's an excellent point. The bottom line is the Birkei Yosef saying, who told you that we have a right to be makel on women to completely potter them if just because you found one Rishon that says that they're potter?
But the fact that Tosfos mentions the Rashbam and then gives a second opinion means that he obviously...
Well, Tosfos himself, in Pesachim, rejects the Rashbam, but that doesn't mean that we have to reject the Rashbam.
Understood.
And we have the Tosfos in Megillah also now. Okay, good. One more stop. Let's take a look.
Hallel?
It's a good question. What about Hallel? Well, Hallel is a mitzvah saseh derabanan, right?
Right.
So l'cha'ora, we could say Afin Hayu Ba'oso Hanes.
Right.
By the way, I just want to mention something incidentally. Remember, just like a little interlude to give you a little bit of drush. Remember, what was Tosfos' kasha on the Rashbam, Laser? Why did he disagree with the Rashbam and say the Rashbam is mistaken about the definition of Afin Hayu? The Rashbam had said that they were an integral part of the nace because it was B'schus Nashim Tzidkaniyos Nigalu Avoseinu Mitzrayim. Right? So, therefore, what Afin Hayu Ba'oso Hanes means, since they played a focal role in the miracle, they have to be obligated in all the mitzvahs of the Geula of Pesach. So what did the Tosfos say was the flaw in the Rashbam?
It's the Lashon of Afhein.
The Lashon of Afhein. Even they are obligated. If, according to the Rashbam, it should not be even they are obligated, but rather what?
Hoyu.
Hein hayu ba'oso hanes, or hein hayu ikar hanes, right? Not af, even them. So the Chassam Sofer asks this question in his Perush on Chumash in Parshas B'Shalach. He asks an interesting question. He says, listen, don't we believe in equality between the genders? Why is it that when we look at the Shiras Hayam, Moshe Rabbeinu and all the men get loads of text for the Az Yashir, and then when it's Miriam's turn with all the women, Vatikach Miriam Haneviyah Achos Aaron Esatof Biyadav Ateitzena Chol Hanashim Acharei Pesupim Uvim Cholos. She takes all the cymbals and the tambourines, and then Vatan Lahem Miriam, one line. Shiru Lashem Ki Ga'o Ga'asus V'Rachavo Ramavayam. He says, what? The women didn't have what to say? It's a good question, huh? So a bunch of men would say, yeah, they're too busy doing other stuff. Yeah, but what kind of question is that? That's a modernisha question, right?
They still were mechuyev to say Hallel.
One second. I'm getting there in a second. So I'm getting to Hallel in just a second. So the Chassam Sofer says, he says, what does it mean to say Shira? What does it mean to say Shira? When you have experienced the miracle triggers you to say Shira. What is the definition of a miracle? So the Chassam Sofer says the definition of a miracle is when HaKadosh Baruch Hu moves heaven and earth for me even when I don't deserve it. That's a miracle. If I am the greatest tzaddik who has ever walked the face of the earth, and Hashem does a nes, Hashem opens up the sky, splits the sea, that's not such a nes. It's a bigger nes when Hashem splits the sea and brings the plagues for a people who are ovdei avodah zarah, who are pagans and are in a low madrug, the memtes sharei tum, right? So now think of it in these terms. Who was on a higher spiritual madrega, the men or the women? The women. So who was privy to a greater miracle, the men or the women? The men. Why? Because they were on a lower madrega and they still got the Kriyas Yamsuf, right? So therefore, for them, because the miracle was a greater miracle, they had an obligation to say a higher level of Shira. Whereas the women, for them, the miracle was not as great of a miracle because that's what we expect. That's what our bitachon was all about all of these years. And that's why they only get one line. So just to get back to what you were talking about, Alan, so do women have an obligation of Hallel? Yes, they do. Because why? It's a mitzvah saseh shazman grama, but it's only midrabbanan. And we apply afhein hayu ba'oso hanes there. So the Chassam Sofer says that's what afhein hayu ba'oso hanes. Granted, it's bizchus nashim tzidkanios nigalu avosenu mitzrayim. They were the primary gender to trigger the miracle. But afhein, they too were privy to a miracle. It wasn't as great of a miracle for them as it was for the men. So even they were part of the miracle. Because for them it was expected more than it was for the men. You hear?
Yeah, but doesn't it seem strange? They didn't say Hallel when they left Yetzias Mitzrayim. They only said it by Az Yashir.
Okay, that's another question. We have a whole drush on it. There's numbers of drushes you can talk about. Why they only said Shira. Right? Okay. Let's go on. Source number 12. Here's another Mishnah and another Tosfos. The Mishnah here talks about Hallel, just what Alan has set us up for. He says, Misha haya eved o isha o katan makrinoso, that regarding the mitzvah of Hallel on Sukkot, really on all of the regalim, the Mishnah says that if someone who doesn't have the same level of chiyuv, such as an eved or an isha or a katan, recite Hallel for him, ona acharein mashehin omrim, v'savo lo me'era. He should answer Hallel with them. He should, in other words, when they say Hodu Lashem, he should say Hodu Lashem, and he's Yotzei. But v'tavolo me'era, but a curse be upon him for having to be dependent upon someone who doesn't have the same level of chiyuv. That's what the Mishnah says.
That's not unique to an Eved or Nisha. The Gemara says that's the way everybody should be reading the Hallel, no? The Oinim, that one leads and then the other answers?
Well, no, here it's makrinoso. It's not because it's a responsive reading, but because he doesn't know Hallel Bichlal. That's the context of this Mishnah. So, over here it says Tosfos, and the reason why he has to recite the words out loud, and he can't just be Shomea Ka'ona, is because she doesn't have the same level of chiyuv of Hallel as he does. So says Tosfos, Mi shahaya eved v'isha, mashma kan di'isha pitur mehalal desukas v'chein da'atzeres. V'taima mishum de mitzvah shazman gramahi, afal gav de bahal de leili psachim, mash beperk avre psachim de mechayvi b'dal kosos. He says, it sounds like from this Mishnah that women are exempt from reciting Hallel on Sukkos and on Shavuos, even though the night of the Seder, it's mashma that women are obligated to say Hallel, because the Gemara says that women are obligated in Dalet Kosos, Umistama lo tiknu Dalet Kosos el kedei lomar aleim Hallel v'Haggadah. And we have to assume that when Chazal instituted Dalet Kosos, they wanted you to say it together with Hallel and the Haggadah. So why is it that the night of Pesach women are obligated in Hallel? If they're obligated, you see, Tosfos makes a very interesting connection. Mm-hmm. If women are obligated in Dalet Kosos, they must also de facto be obligated in Hallel and Haggadah. So this is a new thing that we're seeing over here, but Tosfos just shtups it in incidentally. And his question is, he says, why is it that women are patur from Hallel on Sukkos, but they're obligated in Hallel the night of the Seder? He says, V'yesh lomar, where am I? Oh, he says, Shayni Hallel de Pesach da al hanes ba va'afin hayu ba'oso hanes. Aval kan lo al hanes amur. He says, the difference is, because the Hallel that you say the night of the Seder is because of the miracle that happened when we left Mitzrayim, and afin hayu ba'oso hanes. And therefore women are obligated. But Hallel that is recited on Sukkos and on Shavuos is not specifically going on a particular miracle, it's just thanking Hashem for being our God in general. And therefore you don't have the svara of Afhein Hayu Ba'oso Hanes when it comes to reciting Hallel on Sukkos. And that's why women are patur from Hallel on Sukkos, because it's a mitzvah sasei shazman grama, and you cannot apply the svara of Afhein Hayu Ba'oso Hanes. But on Pesach, women are obligated in Hallel because you do apply the svara of Afhein Hayu Ba'oso Hanes. Now, that's all incidental to our discussion, but what you can pick up from this Tosfos is something very relevant to our discussion of Haggadah. What did Tosfos just slip in there incidentally? He said if Chazal made women drink Dalet Kosos, and the Dalet Kosos have to be drunk al HaSeder, together with Hallel and Haggadah, it stands to reason that women must be obligated in Hallel and Haggadah. The only point that we're going to make is that, according to this, they're only obligated in Hallel and Haggadah midrabanan, just like they're only obligated in Dalet Kosos midrabanan. So this is a point that a number of Achronim make. Here's a sefer called Derech HaMelech from Harav Rafal Yosef Ruby of the 18th century. He was a Yerushalmi Rav. He served as a dayan in the Beis Din of Yom Tov Al-Ghazi. So he writes a commentary on the Rambam in source number 13, and he writes as follows: Umidivrei hatosvos hanizkar tshuva mutzeit lama shehochiach harav Beis David dino midivrei hatosvos. He says, based on the words of Tosfos in Sukkah, we now have a response to the Beis David's suggestion based on Tosfos and Psachim, shekasvu de kol mitzvah sasei deoraisa lo michai v'isha mitam sha'afein hayu ba'oso hanes. That we cannot obligate a woman in any biblical commandment using the argument of afein hayu ba'oso hanes. Im kein muchach delidhitu nashim peturos mimitzvah sasei shal v'higada ta'ayin sham. It would therefore seem that according to the Beis David, basing himself on Tosfos and Psachim, women are exempt from the mitzvah of Haggadah. V'lesa delo amrinan kain el b'mitzvah sasei gereda delo patach ba mitzvah sasei derabana. Listen to his beautiful language. He says, but that's only true when it's purely a mitzvah sasei deoraisa that is not in any way connected to a rabbinic law. But if a mitzvah deoraisa is somehow intertwined with a rabbinic law, then because we can apply the svara of Afin Hayu Ba'oso Hanes to the rabbinic law, it transfers over to the mitzvah deoraisa as well, to obligate them at least on a rabbinic level on the deoraisa mitzvah too. And that's what he says. V'ula mitzvahs v'higadata da'agida be mitzvat kos beit derabanan. He says, but the mitzvah of Haggadah is linked together to the second kos of the 4 kosos. In other words, you have to say the Haggadah on the second kos, right? So the Chazal chivu l'nashim bedaled kosos, mina shechayavos k'mitzvasam u'chetakanasam legamrei. He says if women are obligated in 4 kosos, they're obligated in every facet of the daled kosos, and the kos base al Haggadah niskan, and the second kos was instituted to be drunk while you're reciting the Haggadah. V'chein medukdak b'divrei hatosvos b'sukkah k'mo shekasavti. And that's the way Tosfos seems to be saying it. V'kivin shechayavos b'dalet kosos mistama al Haggadah v'halal niskanu yu'uyin sham uv'hachinicha d'lo liflagu divrei hatosvos hahadodi v'dok. He says, and therefore it seems that women are obligated in the mitzvah of Haggadah, and the way we resolve that is, Tosfos is correct on the one hand in Pesachim. You don't apply the svara of Afin Hayu Ba'osanes when you're dealing with purely a mitzvah deoraisa, but when you have a mitzvah deoraisa that's linked with a mitzvah derabbanan, like Haggadah is linked to the second cup of the Arba Kosos, women will be obligated. Ulefi ha'amur atatir Divrei hatosafot ein chiyuv mitzvah v'higadat l'nashim ela miderabbanan. Kaven demichiv kos beis d'chiyuv aramu alayu asilei chiyuv ha'agada dumya dehalel. And therefore it turns out that there's a very big difference halachically between men and women as far as the mitzvah of Haggadah. Men have a biblical commandment to recite the Haggadah, but a woman's obligation to recite the Haggadah is only rabbinic in nature. So therefore, even though we said before that there are 2 mitzvahs asay deoraisa the night of the Seder and 3 rabbinic mitzvahs, according to what we're concluding now from Tosfos, that's only for men. But for women, there's only 1 mitzvah deoraisa, which is the mitzvah of matzah, and the other 4 mitzvahs are all rabbanan, including the mitzvah of Haggadah, which would mean that a woman could not be motzi a man in the mitzvah of Haggadah, even if the man asked her to be motzi him. Okay.
So Rabbi, just going back to Mishalach then, are you saying that Miriam was not mechuyev to say Hallel?
I didn't say that. I said that her chiyuv was not as great as the men's chiyuv.
But she still has.
Afein hayu ba'oso hanes. They also are obligated, but not as much. In other words, the compelling reason to say Hallel is not as great for women as it is for men.
But it was a drisa.
No.
Well,
What do you mean?
it was the Torah.
For that moment historically.
Because they were in that nace.
But because they personally experienced that nace. Our obligation to say Hallel is a commemoration of the nace that Hashem did for us historically.
So you're saying the women, when they came out of Mitzrayim, were mechuyev to say Hallel, but the next generation wasn't.
Well, even men. Men don't have a mitzvah asay d'oraisa to say Hallel. There's no obligation. It's a d'rabbanan. Hallel is purely d'rabbanan. There's no mitzvah asay d'oraisa to say Hallel. I don't think ever. But certainly not the night of the Seder. It's not a d'oraisa. It's only a d'rabbanan. For men. So, kol shekain for women. Okay?
What constitutes the actual mitzvah of Sipur? I mean, is it just reading through it? Is it discussing? I mean, how far do you take that? Because that's going to make enough commitment also, no?
Kol shelo omar shlosha dvarim elu lo yatsa yidei chavaso. Right? Pesach, matzah, and mar. And you have to explain those 3 things. Why do we eat these 3 things? Pesach, al shem shepasach, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, al abatenu. And matzah, because mishubadim, right? And lo yachlu yismameya. There was no time for our bread to rise. And morer al shem moreru es chaye. I forget what the language is.
So that means that's the only thing that the women couldn't be motzi a man?
No, I mean it would seem so. That's an interesting question. What if what part of the Haggadah is the biblical obligation?
Right.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. That's an interesting question. I don't know. I don't know that you could point to any. Maybe it would only be that section. Maybe Taka, you're right. I don't know.
What about the four
yeah.
sentences?
What?
What about the four statements related to the Bikurim that the whole Haggadah is built around?
Right, but I don't know that's necessarily the mitzvah saseh deoraisa of Haggadah. You're right, the structure of the Haggadah is based on the Parsha of Bikurim, but that doesn't necessarily indicate to us that the mitzvah of Haggadah to Levincha is that mitzvah.
Not to belabor the point, but if we're mechuyev to visualize it as if we ourselves
Right.
went out of Mitzrayim.
Right.
So don't we have a derisa to say Hallel?
Yeah, apparently the only doraisa that we have as far as Sipur is the story, right? You're right that there should be a spontaneous obligation to say Hallel, but I don't believe that it's a halachic one. In other words, the poskim will say that Hallel is only midrabanan.
I think it's the Prime that says that we have a mitzvah every night to be Masker Yetzias Mitzrayim. So
Right.
what is the difference between that?
Right.
So I think he speaks about the idea that it has to be done in a question-answer format.
There's a number of answers to that question, yeah.
Right. So
One answer is that
so
there's...
anything that would fall into that format would constitute the deoraisa. Because that's the difference between the zechira that we have every night compared to...
Others say that it's Chayv Adam Liros Esatzmo Kiluhu Yatzum Mitzrayim. That's the difference. And according to that, so that's Pesach Matzah and Mar, because like the Rambam says, Laharos Esatzmo. So you're only Yotze Kisheyesh Matzah Umar, Pesach Matzah Umar, Munachim Lefanecha. Right? So I guess there's a number of ways to understand it. Okay. I wanted to take a look, our last source that we'll take maybe we'll see the Aruch HaShulchan as well. But the very interesting little essay, little piece that I saw from Harav Avram Yitzchak Toker. I hope I didn't say that wrong. maybe it's Tuker, but anyway, he's a contemporary. I don't know if he's still among the living or not, but I believe that he's a generation before. And he quotes the Rambam as saying as follows. This is a big chiddush that he's going to tell us, but it really has very important ramifications to understanding beyond just our localized discussion. What is a mitzvah saseh shazman grama in general? He quotes the Rambam in Hilchas Kriya Shema saying as follows. This is source number 16. And he says, u'mitzvah lahazkir yetzias mitzrayim beyomu v'layla. There's a mitzvah, like Laser was just talking about, to make mention or to remind yourself of the Exodus, both in the day and the night. Shenamar laman tizkor es yom tzeischa me'eretz mitzrayim kol yemei chayecha. As the Torah says, remember the day you left Egypt, all the days of your life. U'mevuar de mikra zeh anu lemeidim lemitzvah zechiras yitzias mitzrayim beyomu v'layla b'meshech kol hashana. And from this pasuk that's the source text of how we know we have a mitzvah every day. Va'odkra isa b'parshas bo shmos yud beis pasuk gimel zochor es hayom hazeh asher yitzasem b'mitzrayim. Remember this day, in other words, this day 15 of Nisan that you are now leaving Egypt. Umikra zeh lamad harambam lemitzvah saseh shel sipur yitzis mitzrayim belil chamishasar b'nisan. And it's this pasuk, this latter pasuk, that the Rambam says teaches us that there's a separate mitzvah of sipur yitzias mitzrayim, the night of the Seder. All right, so there's two psukim. One is the mitzvah of zechira, of remembering, and the other one is the mitzvah of sipur. Two separate psukim. One applies daily, the other one applies only the night of the Seder. V'hinei be'emes b'krazeh harelo ketiv ematai uve'ezizman chayav lahaskir et hayom hazeh. Now, if you look carefully at the text of that latter pasuk, that pasuk doesn't say when you're supposed to remember. It just says, remember this day, period. But it doesn't tell you how often you're supposed to remember this day. It doesn't tell you when you're supposed to remember this day. Wrote Salomar Yetzias Mitzrayim Ibayomo Balayla. Ela hachiyuvu lahaskir pam echas b'me'es le'es. It seems that the Torah is telling you, remember it on an annual basis. Umemela mitzad zeh im lo hizkir balayla maskiru biyom. And therefore, it sounds like that if b'di'evid you didn't fulfill the mitzvah v'higada to levincha sipur yitzias mitzrayim at night, all right, so do it during the day. Ela da'al zeh ikachiv miuchad l'saper inyan yitzias mitzrayim b'shas achilas matzah umar. But the only reason why the Haggadah cannot be fulfilled during the day is a technical problem, which is that you can only fulfill it when you have matzah and mortar in front of you. Kidichsiv bavur zeh b'shashem atzim or munachim lefanecha. That's what the pasuk bavur zeh. You have to be able to point to specific things to be able to say that because of this Hashem took me out of Mitzrayim. V'im kein lefi zeh harei lo etzem hazman shel chamisha asar b'nisan hu hagorim lemitzvah zu. So it turns out that it's not the day of the 15th of Nisan that obligates us to fulfill this mitzvah. Ela zeh kashur lizman achilas matzah umoror. He says, but rather, it's not dependent upon the 15th of Nisan, it's dependent upon the time when I have an obligation to eat matzah and moror. V'chiyuv ha'Haggadah talya b'chiyuv de matzah umoror. I'm only obligated to recite the Haggadah when I'm obligated to eat matzah and moror. V'chein kosav ha'Magen Avram Baruch Chaim Siman Tov Begimel v'zel Lashon. And now quoting the Magen Avram to support this, he writes, V'nearly the time of the Haggadah niskan ala matzah she'onon lov dvarim harbe. That the Magen Avram writes, we recite the Haggadah when we're eating matzah because matzah is called lechem oni, the bread that requires discussion. Ulefizeh harei lo havi mitzvah zu shel sipur yetzias mitzrayim mitzvah saseh she'azman grama. Big chiddush. He therefore says that the mitzvah of sipur yetzias mitzrayim is not a mitzvah saseh she'azman grama. He says there is a limited time when you can fulfill the mitzvah, but it's still not called the mitzvah saseh shazman grama. Why? Go ahead, Sam.
What you're saying, because you can fulfill it all year round. Just so happens there's also a writer about this matzah and maror being
right. There's a limitation, but that limitation is not based upon doing it at a specific time, but only when you're engage in another activity which is time bound. So, all right, let me hear. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I haven't thought about it a lot, but that aspect that you have to do it at that time is still there. You can't do it in the middle of the year, right? So
you're going to do it when eating matzah, and I can't do that.
If that defines a mitzvah, it does become mitzvah seder.
Okay, but what is he? But okay, so this is the chiddush part. So Sam is saying he's not so sure he buys into it. That this whole idea that it's limited in time, but not because of the time, but rather because of some other obstacle. It's almost like saying that I could get surgery any day of the week, but I'm limited to when I could get surgery because the doctor's only in the OR on Mondays and Wednesdays. So the surgery can be done any day. It just so happens that I can only get it done when the doctor's in the OR. So is that a mitzvah saseh she'azman grama? That's sort of like the argument that he's making, right?
What would you say for matzah?
What?
Would you say matzah is a mitzvah saseh she'azman grama?
Yeah, matzah is a mitzvah saseh she'azman grama because it's specifically linked to eating matzos on the night of Pesach.
So something linked to matzah.
So it's linked to matzah.
You think is also zman grama,
but it's not. That's what he's saying. He's just saying the Torah never tells you when you should make mention of Yetzias Mitzrayim. It just says remember it every year. Right. It just so happens that it also links it to you can only do it when you have matzah and maror in front of you, which are time-bound mitzvahs.
So what do you do on Pesach Sheni? Do you need matzah maror with the korban Pesach?
Presumably so. Yeah, presumably so.
Interesting.
So this is like a whole new. What do you guys say?
It's a big chiddush for him to say that it's not a deraisa.
That it's not a mitzvah saseh she'azman grama.
I mean, yeah.
That's the conclusion. This bar, I've seen it for Kiddush Levana the other way. In other words, what I was saying before. In other words, it's same idea. There's a mitzvah of Kiddush Levana, right? So is it time bound or is it not time bound? Happens to be when it's applicable, when it's visible, and things like that. But really, I have the mitzvah any other time. It happens to be it's visible now.
Okay.
So people have used that. This svara has been used. I don't know if he quotes who.
To obligate women in Kiddush Levana.
Yeah.
Just to complicate it a little further, if a woman has children and doesn't have a husband, is she obligated in Recite the Haggadah?
It seems that she is, yeah. Because just like men are obligated in Recite the Haggadah even when they don't have any, even when they're by themselves, a woman would have the same obligation.
But a Rabbana.
Well, that's what we're debating.
Well,
that's what we're debating. Is according to some Achronim, they're only obligated midrabanan because of Dalit Kosos. But according to what we just saw now from Rav Toker, it's a mitzvah d'oraisa because it's not a mitzvah sasei shazman grama. Just I want to end off. It's implied in the Bir Halacha that women are only obligated midrabanan, because you note that he says, the second paragraph in source number 18. He says, "V'dad lefi ma shepasak hashulchan aruch denashim chayavos gam kein b'dalet kosas kanashim im kein tzrichos lizar sheyamru seder haggadah al kol kos v'kos o she'al kol panim yishmu bi ba'aleihem." He says that women have to hear the Haggadah, or they should either say the Haggadah or hear it from their husbands, since they're obligated in dalet kosos. Di'ilav hachi ledasa prichadash afilu b'di'evid lo yatsu b'shtiyas hakosos dahavid kamoshe shesa'o. He says, because the Pri Chadash is of the opinion that if you drink the Arba Kosos without reciting the Haggadah between the second and third kos, you're not Yotzei Dalet Kosos. If so, if women have the same obligation of Dalet Kosos as men do, they have to recite the Haggadah in order to be Yotzei Dalet Kosos. So it turns out that according to the Bir Halach, it's also only Midrabanan. Okay, so I just want to point that out. And then,
So another question I have.
yeah.
Using the pasuk of the pasuk he's using here is Zohar Sayom Hazeh as the limud for. Isn't there the Minchas Chinuch doesn't quote this. The Chinuch doesn't quote this pasuk. The Chinuch quotes V'Yigadato Levincha Bayom Ahulei Bar. Right? Which is a totally different pasuk than he. So he's building his case on. You see that Zohar Sayom Hazeh that could be said any time, and because it could be said any time, and therefore we can build it. But the mitzvah of the chinuch, mitzvah chaf aleph, is not on this pasuk at all.
Right. He's basing himself on the Rambam. Yeah,
right.
You're right.
Bayom hahu lemor says, I have an...
Bayom hahu.
And there, you wouldn't get into this idea that that it's tied to anything else. So, and that's not that's not where at least the chinuch gets it from.
Okay, I hear.
And most people, when you ask them, what is the mitzvah Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim, where does it come from? They don't quote Zohar Sayom here.
Yeah,
That's
although
like, that's Kaddish Li. That's like it's out of the blue, that pasuk. That's like many of the other psukim of Zohar Sayom. You have Zohar Sayom 10 times in Mishpatim. I mean,
but at least you see the Rambam gets that as his source.
That I don't have an answer for, but it's
Okay.
not a kash on the chinuch. The chinuch would say simply, I don't see where you're going with this. My pasuk is V'Yigadato Levincha.
I also just wanted to point out that, first of all, take a look at the Chayei Adam when you have a chance, because he also, that he holds clearly that they have an obligation of Haggadah. But I just don't remember, let's see. Yeah, he says also like the Bir Halacha, that if they're chayiv in Arba Kosos, they're also chayiv in Haggadah. Okay. And then also the last page, very interesting piece of a tshuva from Rav Yosef Greenwald, who was a survivor of the Shoah. And it was one of the Pupa Rebbes. And he says that he wants to make a differentiation between the mitzvah of Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim and the mitzvah of the Haggadah to Levincha. He says that if women are obligated in matzah and maror, then they're also mistama obligated in Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim. But then he writes, Aval ze eino maspik elo lechayiv noshem b'Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim. Ve'akati baha da'amr Torah v'Haggadah to Levincha da'hagedolim chayavim l'saper lahaktanim yesh lidrosh Levincha v'lo Levitcha. He says, but we could make the following argument, that this obligation that we have to instruct our children may only be to instruct our male children and not our female children. So how do we know that there's an obligation for a girl to attend the Seder and to listen to the Haggadah? Amnam yesh lomar deheicha de lo mistaver liftor lo darshinan b'nei Yisrael v'lo benos kidamrinan b'mezuzah atu gavra boin chaye nashi lo boi chay. He says, but I'll give you a svara. He says, we don't differentiate between males and females when there's no svara to differentiate. Like the Gemara says in Kiddushin, that why would you think that only men are obligated in mezuzah? Only men need protection and women don't need protection? He says, "V'hachanami kivin da'atorah kasva taima mitzvah sipur yitzias mitzrayim laman tisaper v'datem ki ani Hashem de'ikar tachlis asipur hu lahashrish amuna b'leiv habanim v'hu nachutz gam labanos." He says the same svara would apply. He says, what's the whole purpose of relating the Exodus to our children? So that they should know who God is. They should have emunah. He says, what's the svara to differentiate between boys and girls? V'shayach bazeh ke'ein svaras atu gavra boi chayi v'chulei. And therefore, it only makes sense to say that just like there's an obligation to tell our sons, Recite the Haggadah, there's also an obligation to tell our daughters as well. So there are two mitzvahs. One is to instruct our children, and the other one is to fulfill our own mitzvah of relating the Exodus. We've established that men and women are equally obligated to relate the Exodus. The only machlokas is it a derabanan or is it a deoraisa for women? But then he also points out, Rav Greenwald, that the mitzvah of telling our children applies equally to sons and to daughters as well. Just wanted to add that little facet at the end. Okay.
You mentioned the Aruch HaShulchan. So where does he...
Practically speaking, can women, we've got to mean to go around the table and we run it a little bit, including the woman.
That's a very good question. You know, for those people who go around the table, I would suggest, because of this shaila, whether a woman could be motzi a man, that everyone should say the Haggadah in an undertone to themselves while the person is reading that paragraph, so that everyone can be yotze by reading it themselves. That's a very interesting point, because I know a lot of people do that. It's a good point. Okay.
What was the